All right, good morning. This is George Spalding from Pink Elephant. Welcome to Breakfast with Pink. I'm thrilled this morning because we have two very, very smart people on with me, and that's always an exciting moment for me. And and it's also a topic that's kind of near and dear to my heart and something that's been, I think, on everybody's mind as you read the paper. And of course, nobody reads the paper anymore, but as you see your inbox constantly growing and you watch the evening news and all of those types of things. Okay, so let's go. Let's roll. I'm getting a lot of ambient noise. I think that might be you, Jack. Anyway, let's get going. So let me introduce you to the people that you'll be listening to today. Most importantly is Shujane Thompson, Dr. Shujane Thompson. She is Director, Program Performance and Quality Excellence in the Civil Product line under the Information Systems and Global Solutions business unit within Lockheed Martin Corporation. Welcome this morning, Shujane.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Morning. And Jack Probst is our principal consultant here at Pink Elephant, and Jack and I go back a long way. Jack is almost as old as I am, but that's not quite true. But he looks older. Good morning, Jack.
Good morning, George. How are you?
I'm fine. I know you didn't expect me to.
I really didn't, George.
Yeah, I know. Okay. All right. So let's get going. I think the most important thing, because what we're talking about now is cyber resilience, not cybersecurity per se. That's a subset, if you will, or an idea that goes along with it. But really, it's cyber resilience that we're looking for. So I think one of the first things that we need to talk about, and one of the first questions I need answered, and I think maybe the folks who are listening in as well, is exactly what is cyber resilience, what's cyber risk, and then how does that all differ from cyber security?
Shujane, you want to start?
I'm going to throw that to Shujane because this is basically her slide deck.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you. What is cyber resilience? Simply put, cyber resilience is the depth of cyber capability that is adequate to sustain business requirements for current and future. And the key word here is not just for the current, but it's for the future. So cyber resilience is that depth of cyber capability that any individual or organization should acquire to be able to adequately defend and protect their business viability. So, if I may, expand to this by saying, hey, look at the current ecosystem, right? A perfect storm is here in this digital age. We are in a new era of information exchange. Our business exposed to constant attempt to gain information advantages, whether it's for appropriate intent or inappropriate intent. Keep in mind that we are at all times involved in information that is either right at our fingertips or remote to us. Our actions and activities every day are driving the cyber and human interactions around us, which could result in incidents and attacks. So what happened to our ecosystem? So things like data loss. So George, if you could, hit the enter, that this slide will progress. What is attacking us? What is the PII incidents and compromising our critical infrastructure, the different cyber attack. We talk about cybersecurity capabilities, the safety threats, the data leaks, data loss. So if you go to the next slide, it's where that disruption to our day-to-day normal operation. And that disruption is where the loss of cyber resilience. Therefore, organization and business really need to look into deeply how you be able to deepen your cyber resilience capability in order to react to this so-called perfect storm that is approaching to us. I hope I answered the question.
Let's see, seems to be different. Oh, I'm sorry, I was on mute. So before we go on, one question and something that's actually puzzling me, and I'm thrilled that I have somebody who's this smart to ask this question of, and that is this what's changed? Because we've been doing risk management for 30 years and 20 years, and in the world of IT, which we just use the word cyber now, and it really was IT risk management. Now it's cyber risk management, and we've been doing business continuity and disaster recovery conversations for 20 or 30 years in the world of IT. Now, is that somehow different than cyber resilience, or has something fundamentally changed that I don't know?
Well, I think the traditional, I think this is the question addressed to me.
Yes, please. You answer, please, Chu-Jane.
Great. So basically, what changed? I think it's the volume of the information, the speed, and the velocity of the information exchange. In this hyper-connected world, this so-called cyber ecosystem, traditionally in the IT system, we protect the IT with passwords, with the login control, the access control, and thinking the so-called very single-threaded user one-directional access. However, our world has changed. This is a hyper-connected world. Our cyber ecosystem now, really created so-called interdependencies, forcing us to become interdependent. So we are no longer a single thread. We are now becoming a so-called nonlinear interaction in our cyber ecosystem. Therefore, we integrate and reinforces one another. What we do is going to impact the people downstream. What we do today could, just like the butterfly effect, create downstream effect to those folks down, out there that in the cyber world. So this really requires us to rethink our design, our build, our delivering of systems. In the traditional way, we build a system based on requirement. Today, the requirements are multifaceted. The requirements are constantly changing based on our hyper-connected world. So that social interactions, the savviness of our users, and also our complexity of our business interaction have really changed. That require us to look at our business, in terms of, resiliency. How resilient is our business capability that we can maintain the continuity and the growth of our business?
Great. George, let me build on what Sue-Jane said. I don't know that anything radically changed in the past few years. I think instead what's happened is that there's been a growing influence and understanding by the business executives of the criticality of their cyber world, of the information assets that they have asked the IT organization to manage, to the extent that if there is a significant failure, let's don't even talk about a cyber attack. So we don't need to talk about the Home Depots or the Targets or what have you. But if we have a poorly managed change, it is very possible that the business itself can be put at risk, because as Sue-Jane speaks of it, the ecosystem of IT has become an extension into the ecosystem of the business. And so I think what's happened is that within the boardrooms and within the executive halls, there's greater awareness of not only the dependency of IT, but the potential risk that if IT in some way has an epic failure, that there could easily be an epic failure of the business. I mean, you don't have to go back too many years to see examples like Comair of Delta back a few years ago with their catastrophic failure of their pilot scheduling system, and they at Christmas time, and they literally went out of business because of that. So I think it's just the fact that we're seeing the exponential growth of the dependency of business on IT, and I think that's probably more than anything else has brought things to the fore.
Okay, great. So is there more on this particular slide, Sujane, that you want to talk about?
Oh, I think we are good.
Okay,
nice
great.
To add, Jack.
All right, let me see if I can figure myself out here. Whoa, here we go. So, Sujane, do you want to talk to this slide as well?
Certainly. I think this is where, today, because the environmental changes, the speed and the velocity of our environmental change creating this perfect storms. And, human beings are reacting and continuously being reactive to the perfect storm hitting us. We, as a smart service provider, service management practitioner, really need to think about what are the cyber afterthoughts out there. I mean, today, if you look at, the news says the British law enforcement agencies are ill-equipped to confront a fast-expanding and multi-billion-pound cybercrime phenomenon. And this cybercrime is a structural crime, and they are virtually just about existing everywhere around you. How do we defend? How do we, conduct the offense capability that can position us to be able to defend our territories? This is no longer just putting firewalls. This is no longer just putting the monitoring capabilities and detective capability. This requires predictive. This requires us to be able to raise the awareness for everyone, because you and I both know the cyber threat really is more insider threat than more outsider threat. Averagely, you talk about 75% insider threat and 25% outsider threat. And how could the 75% insider threat occur is really a lot of afterthoughts. It's causing that really costly, consequences, from our current environment. The organization, the business owners, we're aware of how cyber resilient our organization is, how vulnerable we are. We conduct risk assessment, but that could be very single-threaded risk assessment. Are we considering business, management capability as well as service management capability, and combined with the quality capability to be able to look at in a 360-degree manner at all time, provide that cyber resilience capability. Do we know what the to be going to be? And how do we be able to, set that goal of the depth of cyber resilience so we can afford and feasible to achieve? And how do we prioritize it? We don't have deep pocket in today's economy. We're going to invest on the area that gives us the most bang in the buck. So our risk assessment is no longer just identify the risk, but also how you mitigate it, and how you mitigate it in the most cost-effective way. And then, it's where you exercise your planning, your good project management practice, you fund the activities, and you execute it in a target time with the return and with the capability that you strive for to achieve. Lastly here is, we often missing this so-called evaluation life cycle is, every activity, every capability we implement, we've got to have ways and means to go back to evaluate it and then really conduct the lessons learned, conduct a corrective action, and to be able to learn from that and really turn your organization into that learning environment. Then you will be able to have the best capability to be able to raise that gap of cyber resilience. This is taking people, this is taking technology, this is taking processes, and then continue to improve on that. So we're going to avoid those afterthoughts, throughout your life cycle to ensure that we are not that victim of the afterthoughts.
So, Jack, down in the lower right-hand corner, we've got business management, service management, quality management. I know that one of the topics that's kind of near and dear to your heart is the fact that cyber resilience is actually a process or falls into the process framework. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think that makes a great deal of sense, George, because I go back to the three steps that Sujane has on this slide. The process world itself assures that the organization can function in a way in which they can deliver against their goals, their objectives, achieve their mission and their specific strategies. And they do that by embedding processes within the organization, whether it's within business or other service providers like IT, like the legal department, finance, and the like. And so from a process standpoint, we can easily put the organization at significant risk. And I think it's important that we continue to harken back to the word risk, because that's really what we're talking about. When we're talking about cyber resilience, we have to recognize that there is risk specifically embedded in the organization, not so much due to external factors, but even just around the way in which we work. If our processes themselves are immature and ineffective, it is highly likely that we can, as I mentioned earlier, we can put the business at significant risk, because those things that we would hope that we could control, we can't, because the process doesn't assure consistency of performance of individuals and things of that nature. So as Sue Jane was talking about this, understanding the as-is and the to-be state, I think, are key and critical. And it comes back to what are the assets that, at least from an IT perspective, as we think about cyber, what are the assets themselves that are potentially at risk? And we always talk about, when we talk about cyber, we always tend to bring it back to cybersecurity. So we're thinking in terms of detection, we're thinking in terms of firewalls, we're thinking in terms of those things that we need to assure that we keep the barbarians away from the gate. But the as-is and the to-be state also needs to focus on how it is that we need to, in an effective manner, in an efficient manner, we need to be able to manage those IT assets so that if there's the potential for failure, we recognize it, we evaluate how serious the failure might be to the organization. And I'm not talking about the fact that you can't get your email, although I guess probably a major failure of your email would probably, for some organizations, be a horrible thing. But what we are talking about are risks, say, associated with the information and the systems, the services that are managing the key corporate financial data and things of that nature. Understanding what the as-is state in terms of our ability to manage that through our processes, and then recognizing if we do have risk, we have put those assets at risk, what should the to-be state look like in terms of, again, back to the process stability, maturity, repeatability, consistency, and all of those factors. And so, yes, I think process is huge. Process assures that we're going to get the consistency of results, and we evaluate between the known as-is and the known to-be of those processes, and make decisions about what we need to do in terms of improving them. And that's where that prioritization stage steps in. So I like the fact that Sue Jane's got on this slide the business management, the service management, and the quality management, because all of that speaks to the integral nature of how business itself works, and where those Venn diagrams, the Venn diagram where they intersect, that truly is where we need to be paying attention to, understanding the gaps and working towards making overall improvements.
You know, you bring up the critical assets and the security of assets and the risk of assets, things like that. So we preach a lot in the world of service management about services, and we try and basically get IT departments to talk in terms of services, define themselves in terms of services. Everything is about services. And therefore, when you start assessing risk, people are thinking in their mind, which is good, this is a good thing, they're thinking, you know, which services are at risk, which services do this, do this. Well, it turns out that for the last couple of years, the folks at the Department of Homeland Security created an assessment program, and they've assessed well over 100 different, both government and private organizations. And one of the statistics they came up with, which is kind of interesting, was that more than 70% of the organizations had already identified the critical services that could be at risk. that was good. 70% was kind of good, and it would be nice if it was more. But of those same organizations, less than 50% had identified which assets were feeding into those services and which assets were therefore at risk. And so even though you understand the concept of services and you understand the concept of assets individually, no one was putting it together. They were saying that service is at risk, we should work on that, and everybody was ignoring the assets underneath it that completely underpin the service. So that was just a comment more than anything. All right, I'll move on to the next slide. So this gets back to Sue Jane's comment where it's 75% insider and 25% outsider. And the two things I want to ask about and then have you guys talk about this. One was, in my old days of security, when I was a security trainer, yes, friends, I was a security trainer. I actually trained a lot of people on Windows NT security, otherwise known as an oxymoron during the first decade of this. Anyway, moving on. So the point there was we always used to talk about the fact that insider was the problem. Inside people were you have the people intentionally doing it, disgruntled employees and things of that nature, and then you have people unintentionally doing it, basically just making mistakes, and also maybe they have too much. They have too many rights in terms of their capabilities within systems. They should be more limited, but they're not. So not only do they make mistakes, but the mistakes can be bigger mistakes because suddenly they have admin rights, so they have write and delete rights when they shouldn't have those types of things, as opposed to the outside attacks and things of that nature. Now, I heard, this was very anecdotal, but I heard someone talk about the fact that because of the drastic increase, and then the other insider things are what Jack's been talking about with bad processes and bad changes and bad releases and things like that. But I've heard recently, and as I said, very anecdotal, I don't have a source for it, that this line is moving a little bit, because of the drastic increase in attacks, that it's actually more outsider, perhaps, or a half and half. I'll let you guys talk about this. Sue Jane, you want to kick it off?
Well, I think, like I say, this digital ecosystem, it really created this new era of perfect storms. And I think whether that water line is moving up, moving down, leaves us no option not to look at cyber resilience with great degrees of concerns. And, we talk about processes. We can use the process to drive the cyber resilience results. We can leverage technology to reinforce the effectiveness and efficiencies, but I think the last question right there is, how do we educate and train our people so they will be able to have the highest levels of alert and be able to understand that cyber resilience human fabric, so they will be able to be able to perform, like what George is saying, is not because they'll not know and make mistakes, is they know how to not to make mistakes. I think that is the equation often been overlooked. And so when we say insider threat, outsider threat, the bottom line here to be able to maintain the depth of resilience is to leave no rock unturned. Meaning, you got to have ability to be able to, at all times, be able to monitor your business behavior, to be able to monitor the activity that occur in your enterprise, the activity occur outside your enterprise. This really requires not just all hands on deck within your organization, but also have the ability to be able to reach out and have the ability to be able to look at the surrounding environment to create that, the fabric and the depth of your protection and defensive capability. And so if you look at the next slide there, really give you that, that view in terms of not just from the traditional, IT asset projections. We have portfolio management capability. We map the mission and business objective to the, to the services that we would like to invest. and then map the services to the asset that's supporting those services. If you look at traditional portfolio management, what is missing there is that human asset, is that, the maturity of the process asset are not mapping to the portfolio management capability. So we look at those hard assets to maintain and protect and to invest, yet we often, leave the processes and human, maturity as an afterthought. So service management really is at the core and the center of enabling that cyber resilience capability in terms of looking at business management capability to achieve that business viability. Look at the user experience management, because when user experience are started going downhill, guess what? You may end up trigger more of the attack from outside because you get disgruntled. Customers and consumers, dissatisfied customer and consumer, they could go to the other organization and reveal some of the information that are sensitive in a business sensitive information. That is another leg of user experience management that would need to be closely looked at in support of your cyber resilience depth of capability. Also, you look at the cornerstone here, the infrastructure management. Goes without saying, that is the step 101, is that manageability and maintainability of your infrastructure. If you have a diverse footprint of your enterprise, of your infrastructure, how do you be able to manage and control, and with the agility and flexibility, be able to continue supporting your business evolution, your business change? I think when we conducted changes, is when the risk started to occur, because the turnaround time, be able to meet that very short turnaround time and rapid deployment requirement. How do you protect? How do you secure? Lastly, here is the resilience management, because that is not just writing this documenting a continual operation, a CROOP plan, a disaster recovery plan, or a CROOP plan. This is really looking at all time how resilient is your enterprise, how resilient is your population, how resilient is your business. And then look at your sustainability. You look at your profitability, because if you're not profitable, you start sacrificing a lot of critical resilience capability, and that's where you started opening up a lot of holes. The contingency practice. Do you align your contingency in terms of the different type of potential event today and potential event occur tomorrow? So that contingency and continuity of operation really is a day-to-day activity. Is no longer just putting a plan together and walk away with it. It's no longer just that's monitoring it. We need to look at the trending. When we conduct the risk assessment, we need to look at the trending. We need to look at the past historical data. We need to understand if there's any systemic issues. And, no longer just do the risk management, opportunity management. How do we leverage opportunity to be able to further enhance our resilience capability? So this is kind of a full, broad concept here, how to tie the services management with cyber resilience.
So, okay, Jack, you want to elaborate?
Yeah, George, can you go back to the previous slide?
Yes, there you go.
So I really, really like this slide, because if you Google cyber resilience, the bulk of the references that you're going to get is that cyber resilience is synonymous with cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. And my belief is that the threat universe to the organization is much broader than what you might experience through cybersecurity. And so I really like this slide, because what it does, wherever that line is, so if it's 10%, 20%, 50%, it doesn't matter from the outside threat. What it also recognizes is that there are also threats inside the organization in terms of what we can do to ourselves. And some of that may be the fact that someone does something nefarious and they steal information and so on and so forth. And that's always possible, and that would be truly a security threat. But it also goes back to the last question that you asked, George, around processes, and that if process fails, it is possible that we can put the business tremendously at risk. So for me, as I think about this, as I think in terms of resilience of the organization, the ability to basically take a licking and keep on ticking, we also have to consider the fact that we have a much broader threat universe, and it is included in terms of, you know, of what we potentially can do. It's, as Pogo said, we've found the enemy and it is us. If you go to the next slide, this is a really powerful slide. Sue Jane, great thought here. I mean, just so much that you could spend time on with this, but rather than looking at the individual dimensions, I think one of the concepts that people have when they talk about service management, they go back to the definition of service, right? Delivering value to the customer, et cetera, et cetera. And so when we think in terms of service management, we're thinking in terms of the value creation, the value delivery, the value management through our services back to our customers. But the way I also think about this, and this is what is being hammered home by Sue Jane's 4 dimensions, is that service management is also part and parcel to risk management. That I have to think in terms of, if I'm going to create and deliver value to the customer, I also have to do it in such a way that I minimize, mitigate, or somehow eliminate the potential threats to the business. In other words, we have to also practice good, solid risk management. We don't talk a lot about risk management when we talk about the service management processes, but I think it's there. I think if we follow the practices that Sue Jane is outlining here, and we do service management processes, we understand the assets that are at risk. George, to your comment earlier, it's as well, if people don't know what assets are risk, then I guess they don't have a CMDB. But if we do our service management well and we manage our services effectively, we are managing the risk. And I think it's important to recognize that. Whatever people take away from the conversation today, I think the one thing they need to be clear about is that they have to extend and broaden their view of cyber resilience and the relative risk to the organization. It goes beyond hacking. It is truly part and parcel to the way in which we are managing these services and delivering value back to the customer. So,
well, I think that what's happening in today's society is that the word cyber, when anybody hears the word cyber, they think cyber attack or cyber security. It's not true, but that's what they think. I think it's like a knee-jerk thing that people are equating the word cyber instead of, you remember when the internet came about and when everybody said, "Ooh, we're in cyberspace." It didn't have a bad connotation to it. Now it has a bad connotation. For whatever reason, the word cyber now has bad connotations. It has negative, it's attacks and all that stuff. If we had said, computer risk or IT risk or those types of things, everybody would get it and everybody would think that was normal. Cyber risk is just the same. It's not any different. It's the same. And when we talk about resilience, I believe that resilience, it's fascinating. One of the as I've done more research on this, a lot more discussions about resilience are around what happens if you have a flood, what happens if you have a tornado, what happens if you have, this kind of storm or an earthquake, what happens if you lose your spouse. Those are we get into personal resilience, but those are the resilience conversations that people are more used to having. Now we're talking about resilience of an organization, resilience of a business, which we normally would talk about in the context of business continuity. How is the business going to continue based on the fact that this happened or that happened, this happened, that happened? And when we talk about risk and risk management, it's the same concept. It's called, we need to evaluate the risks, understand what they are, prioritize them, discuss our exposure to certain risks and vulnerabilities, and make a plan, as opposed to just saying, well, we'll roll the dice, like calm air, and we'll roll the dice, and then we'll be okay, or we won't. I think that the key here is, a risk is something that hasn't happened and has a certain probability that it might happen. right? It could be a high probability, low probability. But the key here is planning. We have to take into account that these things might happen, and therefore we develop a plan so that when it happens, if it happens, when it happens, we have a plan. We're not sitting there going, I don't know what to do. No, we know what to do. Okay, so I'm going to move on. More comments from either one of you?
I think you're spot on.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so here we are again. Now we're at the cyber lifecycle DNA. Talk to this, please, Eugene.
Great. So if you could do me a favor, is when you may want to continue hitting the enter button so we can pop up the build chart. We can build the chart together.
Okay.
So, well said. And this is where really started, I call it machine needs people, right? Machine needs people. We are, traditionally very good at building IT capability, very good at building cyber security capability, very good at building the different system capability to enable the business function, to protect us, to, be able to provide a monitoring and surveillance capability. And in my mind, there's a different levels of maturity. We have cyber aware, then become cyber savvy, then become cyber ready. But is cyber ready enough? And I think the next level, I call it cyber resilience. And so in order to achieve the cyber resiliency, we need to complete that cyber lifecycle DNA. And that DNA, we need to build it into each of the organization or each of the individual. And every organization, every individual is different because your needs, your environment is different. You also need to look at not just your environment, you as an individual, is also that environment surrounding you. So if you try to look at the so-called DNA strings, if you would, from this total life cycle perspective, your current as is. We need to know as is. We need to know where we are at. Where is our DNA today? And, so the security posture. How is your security posture? The incident and response capability, that reactive capability is step 101. You need to be able to have that, fundamental reactive recovery capability, response for emergency and for urgencies. However, you also need to carefully evaluate your as-is in terms of your reactive versus preemptive because, any incident when it occurs, it's going to create not only, a material loss, but also that mental loss. And I call it mental loss, meaning, that morale of your organization, that damage to your personal, credibility. Those are the know as is. That DNA need to be able to have that posture and maturity to be able to, secure your as is. You look at the 2B there, is that depth of resilience. And I kept talking about the depth of resilience. This is not just, process maturity. That depth requires you to not only have your system capability, your technology capability, you also need to have that very, very mature, very agile, but very resilient processes to support it. And then, the last leg of that is, for that depth of resilience is that, the alarm and alert and the cyber aware of your personnel. And so future business model is another really important item to really help you to build a DNA is what is your future going to be? What is your business model? If you have an international operation, how do you make sure your resilience is built into your different international components, your information exchange? We all understand the ITAR requirements, but the ITAR is only governmental policies. In your organization, do you have an ITAR-like command and control? So that, therefore, you still position yourself in an international wide with that competitive advantage because your competitors are at all times looking from the fence and looking in and can steal your PIs, can steal your capabilities. How do you maintain that boundary today is not hard boundary anymore. Those boundaries are very soft. And you could come from your corporate level, it could come from individual level, it could come from your branch level, and that known to be critically important when you build that fiber of your DNA. Prioritization, that's where a lot of time you are seeing, the structured cyber attack occur is they try to, manipulate your prioritization approach. Therefore, the area that they help you to create an opening for them to be able to attack you. And therefore, that risk and benefits analysis is no longer, just a across the board risk and the benefits. You got to look at all aspects in terms of internal versus external. Mitigation of disabilities, because you don't have a deep pocket and you have all the different investment and that, to be that you like to strive for, but you got to have the ability to know what is going to protect you and what's the foundation, what's the reactive defense, what's the preemptive defense. And you got to be able to put your money on the right spot. And this is not just a betting game or a gamble. This requires you to do that methodical analysis and trade-off analysis to be able to put you in the right position, right? And then affordability goes without saying. Everything has to be cost-effective. And then the exercise of changing your mindset from, what should we do to what happens if we don't do it? What's the consequence if we don't do it? And that's the mindset that we need to build into the enterprise, build into our DNA. Then we will be able to come up with the best prioritization approach. And for the planning and funding, today is the word I call opportunity rich. And so if you no longer is the only one to fund this capability, there's partnership you can strive for. There's opportunity for outsourcing. There's opportunity for you to acquire the services as opposed to you building it organically. And, you want to stage that or you want to do a big bang release. Those are the plain and fun, exercises for you to help yourself to decide, I'm buying this, I'm building this, or I'm actually borrowing this. And so those are the different opportunities, if you will. Exercise, when you execute it, you got to look at the different levels of cyber resilience. You're defending it or you're offending it. You're trying to create a so-called, the hacking, ethic hacking capability, or you are actually just defending from attack. And, many of the organizations say, oh, if I have a training program, I'm good enough. But training is not equate to you actually conduct the true cyber exercises. And the cyber exercise could carry a long way. Yes, it could be very costly, but, you got to weigh that return and be able to evaluate whether those exercises and training are really effective for you. And of course, goes without saying, I say that that's a step 101, is your ability to do rapid response and recovery, because your business has to continue operating. And so rapid response and recovery is very important. Even you are deploying new capability, you still need to make sure you entice them that rapid response and recovery capability. And the ability to be the major yourself. Are we there yet? Are we having the depth of maturity that is appropriate for our organization? And then lastly here is, in a continued improvement, no longer you can do traditional risk and opportunity, no longer you can just do the continuous CSR, is that ability to understand that non-linear cyber threat. And how do we be able to continue to improve ourselves to enhance our posture by understanding that non-linear cyber threat. And again, this is no longer just technology. This is not just IT. This is including all technology convergence, to help us to be able to build that capability. And people and process has to be that center of synergy and momentum as well.
Thanks, Eugene. Jack?
Yeah, a couple things that Eugene said that I'd like to elaborate on. So one, if you look at this chart, first of all, if you kind of squint your eyes, it's going to look like PDCA or any of the other improvement cycles. So I think it will resonate quite well with organizations as they think in terms of how they might execute this. I also, as I look at this, and I think, George, you had said that earlier about maturity levels, as you work through the various stages of the DNA, it's almost thinking in terms of it like a muscle that as I continue to use it, I continue to exercise it and so forth, I'm going to continue to get better at it. But if the organization turns their attention someplace else, and it's going to be very easy to do with respect to this notion of cyber resilience, because to some degree, people, as you do with continuity planning, people are going to think that this is insurance, and maybe I can not worry about this now because nothing has happened to us yet, so maybe I can spend some time on some other activities that are important. But if you don't continue to exercise this muscle, the strength of the organization, the ability to bounce back from and a risk that becomes manifested truly does become a real issue to the viability of the organization. And then there's one phrase on here, Sujane. So you have down there at the bottom of prioritize, it says, what happens if we don't? So I wrote down, I think we may have coined a new term. It's the risk investment return. So if we've identified our risk, as we've identified as we work through the gap analysis, we then have to make some decisions. What's the return to the organization of addressing the risk? Is it something that we can ignore because the risk itself is so slight, so minimal to the organization? Or is the return to the organization in the event that that risk itself is manifested, we need to move forward with the planning, with the funding, the execution, and the like. And so I think there's a real linchpin in that prioritization stage where the organization, through its own mechanisms, has to make some decisions, critical decisions in terms of its long-term viability. And it's that one phrase, what happens if we don't? So new term, risk investment return.
I like it. We'll tweet it. We got to tweet it because until we tweet it, it's not real.
It's not real. That's true.
Yeah, you know that. That's the way that works.
Yes.
Okay. So, all right. So 4 steps. This is kind of our closing kind of wrap up here. So I'm going to give this to Sujane, and then Jack, you chime in. I have to step away for about 2 minutes, and but I'll be back, and I'll let you know when I'm back. Okay, so hit it, Sujane.
Oh, I love Jack's new term, and we got a trademark there for Jack, is the risk investment return. I think that's right on, and because we understand that prioritization stage is really the key to set a strategic direction. It's the key to be able to put the money on the bet the right horse, if you will, for lack of a better term. However, I'm a believer in today's environment. Even with the perfect storm coming at us, people are not aware of the severity of it, and therefore, what happens if we don't? Is where we create a sense of urgency, and that's not only help the decision maker to make decision, but also help the decision maker to make decision in a timely manner. So, the previous chart is really giving you that very complex, how you be able to establish that cyber resilience DNA. And I'm sure many of you may have your head spinning because of the detail how you build a DNA. But, to me, for any of the organization, there are 4 steps to cyber resilience. And so this, to me, it will resonate with you. You can take it, memorize it without, a degrees of effort. And I believe that's the best approach, because if people can resonate your approach, remember their approach, and continue to carry on and abide to their approach, you probably have the most chance to achieve successes. Because I believe today's environment is very complex. And with us constantly being in the front end of the cyber information flow, we tend to be distracted very easily. So how do you bring the enterprise together with you and moving forward to achieve that appropriate level and the depth of cyber resilience? Here are the 4 steps in my mind, and this is probably Sujane's 4th step here. First step is to really tune up your sensors. You really got to understand where you are at, where the to-be going to be. That sensor is where for you to be able to put yourself at the most aware, most savvy stage to make the most appropriate decision for your enterprise or for yourself. The second step here is really understand the as-is. Really be having this so-called, thorough understanding, no smoke and mirrors, and truly understand, have a really, independent and very objective view to your current environment. To understand as-is. This is not just your small circle of yourself or your organization in the center, but also that environment around you, including your competitors, including your peer service provider, including your suppliers, including your customers, including your consumers, including those folks, are lawmakers, they are policymakers, because all of those activity is constituting your ecosystem. And so know as is really require you to tune up your sensors so you have the at all time awareness of where you are at. and where your vulnerabilities are, and where are the so-called upcoming threats are. And as an example, folks may worry about your personal identifiable information to be disclosed, but many of you may not aware of the inability to protect your anonymity. So, your anonymous status could be, it could be no longer, to be protected. And you as a charity donor, you don't want your identity to be revealed, so you want to be able to maintain an anonymity. But that could be a threat to you because, how do you know if you don't have the sensor, you don't tune up your sensor, how do you know your anonymity actually has been protected and has been, maintained? So first step, tune up your sensors. Second step, understand the as-is. And the third step is really partner to achieve to be. I'm a believer in today to optimize your partnership because, again, you are not in the universe by yourself anymore. That interdependency from the cyber world is creating us to, we couldn't help it to depend on others. So that appropriate partnership is going to help you to achieve the depth of cyber resilience with the least cost figures, able to get you that most cost-effective path to achieve the appropriate depth of cyber resilience capability. So partnership is the key word right there. You can have alliances. Like I said, you can buy, you can build yourself, you can borrow, you can even share the cost together and share the risk together, share the opportunity together. So that's the third step that I believe in, is the path to cyber resilience. Lastly, here is really addressing the human, the human beings, the human behavior. Our human behavior are driven by the changes of our environment. Today, nobody can live without a cell phone in your fingertip. Nobody, sit in very few will sit in the train reading newspaper anymore because we are reading the news from our cell phones. That ability to be able to understand human behavior change, to be able to model and simulate human behavior change based on the different technology change, different type of social environment change, and learn from that. It's going to help you to have the different way to look at your enterprise with a different lens. That's how you'll be able to understand and prioritize and fund and plan your cyber resilience capability that is most appropriate for your enterprise. Jack, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, this is a great model, Sue Jane.
By the way, I'm back, guys.
Excellent. So George mentioned earlier that resilience, in many cases, it goes beyond just even the business and IT. I read a book recently by Judith Rodin called The Resilience Dividend, and what she's speaking about is societal resilience. And so I kind of look at this, Sue Jane, and I just want to make some points about this in terms of like the flow. So as an example, I like to think in terms of analogies. So we've got our first named storm out in the Atlantic, and so communities and so forth are trying to be prepared in the event that it turns landward. Well, if a community has never experienced a hurricane or a tropical storm before, they really don't know what to do other than to start first with evaluating and learning from other communities in terms of what they experienced, what they need to do in advance, and so forth. And so I think from a cyber resilience perspective, in many cases, what we can do is we can evaluate and learn from, unfortunately, the bad experiences of others. What is it that we can pick up that in turn allows us to feed into your other 3 points, Sue Jane? So for instance, from a hurricane, tune up our sensors. We connect with the National Hurricane Center and various weather bureaus and so forth, so that we understand what our relative risk is. And then we also understand our internal capabilities to deal with emergencies, but also partnering with say, the Homeland Security in terms of, what resources could be brought to bear after a storm and so forth. And so from a cyber resilience, if we learn from others without having to have had to experience the bad thing ourselves, we can actually use that knowledge to help us build the other 3. So I think that there's this kind of interesting network mesh going on with respect to your 4 steps that almost as I look at it, it's like fourth becomes 1 and 1 becomes 1B or something like that. But I think it's excellent advice.
And the concept of lessons learned, of course, has been around forever. What's interesting, I think, and remember that rolling all the way back to the beginning of this hour, I asked you, Jane, what really was different, and we talked about the volume of what's going on, the speed and intensity of what's happening, and the connectedness, and those are things, unfortunately, that we have to learn because they weren't around before. We really have no history really to go back to. We have some basic history on anything that can go wrong and what we need to do to be resilient, but those are the new elements that are causing us to kind of why this topic is coming back up in conversation as opposed to just being pushed aside. So, all right. So let's see. Any final thoughts, Sue Jane?
Well, I think I will reiterate, cybersecurity is only one of the functions in our enterprise to enable capability, however, cyber resilience, it's a requirement to survive. And so, from cyber aware to cyber savvy to cyber ready, I think the highest form is cyber resilient.
That's great. I love it. By the way, did you make that cyber ready, cyber savvy, cyber ready thing? Did you do that?
Yeah.
Jane? Another thing that has to be tweeted quick or it'll go away. Somebody else will tweet it and they'll take credit for it. Okay, absolutely. Jack, do you have any final words?
Yeah, so I think that, so back to the earlier question, George, that you asked me about process. I think process in service management has been, it's been the lingua franca for the business and IT to have conversations together. But I think cyber resilience ratchets up the conversation. I think cyber resilience takes us from the discussion between, say, the operating or functional managers within business and IT, and it actually becomes a board issue. This is what, to my way of thinking, this is what should keep the board members and the CEO and the president of organizations awake at night. Because if they have not done their homework ahead of time, this really could be catastrophic to the organization.
And I think that the problem is that they're depending completely on the security element of it, on the locks and the doors and the walls and all of that, and those will fail. It's that simple. The real conversation in terms of outside threats, the conversation is you will be hacked. There's pretty much no question. It's just a question of when. It's not a question of if. All right, well, boy, we spent a whole hour talking about this, and I get the feeling we could talk about it some more, but nobody would stick around for it. So thank you very much, Eugene Thompson from Lockheed Martin. Thank you, Jack Probst, Principal Consultant at Pink Elephant. This is George Spalding saying so long. We have recorded this. It'll be on the Pink Elephant website within a few days. Thank you very much, all you who attended.